Grace, mercy, and peace be unto you from God, who is creator, Christ, and comforter. Amen. Well, here we are again this week, a text that makes you want to ask the question, what? What in the world is Matthew trying to get Jesus to say now? And why? And why, especially would these words be the words that Jesus would say last in his public ministry? What is going on here? Well, let's set the context again. Matthew's community is Jewish by descent and Christian by belief. They have been through the ringer, so to speak, in these last few years. The temple has been destroyed, so they are a people without a spiritual, physical center. And to top it off, as the Romans were besieging Jerusalem, Josephus tells us that it wasn't very pretty. General Titus crucified up to 500 Jews every day. As a matter of fact, Josephus says, there was not enough room for all the crosses and not enough crosses for all the bodies. Pretty tough context. Well, that puts weeping and gnashing of teeth and being thrown into the outer darkness in a little bit of a different light, doesn't it? The writer of Matthew's world was a mess. Well, separating modern sheep from goats isn't such a hard task. Sheep have curly wool, goats have straight. Sheep usually don't have horns anymore, and goats do. Sheep are more docile and just plain dumb. And goats, they're not so docile and not so quiet, and they can be just plain mean. But in Jesus' day, sheep and goats looked a lot more alike. And it took an experienced shepherd to tell them apart, to separate them. Notice in the text for today, it is the Son of Man, Jesus himself, the great shepherd, who does the dividing. And what about all the nations? For the writer of Matthew, all the nations are the foreign governments, not the people of Israel. So then, in this scene, Jesus is separating those governments who have been benevolent and supportive from those who have not. Supportive of what? Well, of Israel, of course, and of the Jews. Why? We call the first part of the sermon. The temple in Jerusalem is destroyed. Hundreds, if not thousands, of Jews have died, and people of God have had to scatter to the ends of the earth. What countries would be willing to let the diaspora into their own country? The sheep ones, of course. So the separation has to do with those who are not believers. Or does it? Notice the surprise in both of the groups in our text today. They were shocked. What? They asked. When did we do these things? When did we not do these things? Jesus' reply was, when you did it to the least of these, my sisters and brothers, you did it to me. Well, they have no clue and no recollection of doing anything like what Jesus says. And Matthew has Jesus' last public address mirror his first public address, the Sermon on the Mount. In the part we call the Beatitudes, listen to how these words match up. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst. I was hungry, and you gave me food. I was thirsty, and you gave me something to drink. Blessed are those who mourn. I was a stranger, and you welcomed me. Blessed are the poor. I was naked, and you gave me clothing. Blessed are the merciful. I was sick, and you took care of me. Blessed are the pure in heart. Blessed are the peacemakers. I was in prison, and you visited me. What in the world is Matthew trying to say? It's Christ the King Sunday. This is the last Sunday of the church year, and we hear the last public words of Jesus' ministry in Matthew. We claim Jesus to be the one who orders and rules our lives, but does he? As C.S. Lewis has Mr. Beaver say of Aslan in the Chronicles of Narnia, this Jesus guy is a very different kind of king. You see, Jesus' power and authority are not found in the usual places, among the beautiful and the intellectual and the influential and the wealthy. Although he loves these people, Jesus' power and authority comes from the most unusual place of all, from a cross, with arms outstretched for everyone. As we sit in this beautiful space and are gathered here in this time to share in community, we bear witness to the most powerful gift of all, a king who died so that all may live. And as we end this church year, as we settle our gaze on the cross and we remember Jesus' gift to us of forgiveness and life and salvation, may we leave this place with eyes wide open to see Jesus. And I hope you're better than I do. When I was a pastor on the south side of Chicago, there was this old woman who stood on the corner of the street in my neighborhood who had a sign that said, "Help me feed my grandchildren." She was an older woman, and I saw her there pretty frequently, but I was always too busy on my way to take care of one parishioner or another, to do one more good work for the sake of the kingdom. Until one day I was stopped at that corner light, and she came up to the door of my car and looked at me. And I looked at her. Tweed wool coat, black stockings, ratty black shoes, babushka on her face, sign in her hand, and I swear to you, her face, it morphed. It morphed from her face to the face of Jesus. And then the people behind me at that stoplight reminded me not so gently that the light turned green, and I drove on, promising myself that the next time I saw this grandmother, I would stop and take the time to find out about her story and help her in every way I could. But there was no next time. She was never there again. I know that God has forgiven me because I've asked. And when God gives you forgiveness, you know you're forgiven. But that grandmother, I don't deserve her forgiveness. And Jesus' words haunt me. I was hungry, and you gave me no food. I was thirsty, and you gave me nothing to drink. As a Christian who follows Jesus, who saw this woman's need that day and drove away, the consequences of my inaction are always with me. I am at fault. I am to blame. Because of my own inaction and my own busyness, I don't know what happened to that grandmother or her grandchildren. I pray for her every day. And I could have done so much more. Just because I'm forgiven doesn't make the situation any less my responsibility. And in this week of Thanksgiving, it makes me sick to think that we live in a country as rich as ours, and grandmas have to stand on corners and beg for food. Even Cuba, that poor country by standards, everyone has something to eat. And Cuba's communist. We're supposed to be Christian? What is wrong with this picture? The church, his church, is all about feeding the hungry and clothing the naked and welcoming everyone and asking and visiting those in prison. This, Jesus says, is what the church is. Not beautiful buildings, not sanitized purposes. How we care for the least of these. It is what the body of Christ does. Stanley Hauerwas said, the difference between followers of Jesus and those who did not know Jesus is that those who have seen Jesus no longer have any excuse to avoid the least of these. Let's pray. God, help us to see. Open our eyes. Open our hearts. Open our hands to see you in the least of these that we need this week. Give us the courage to do something to help. Give us the wisdom we need to make a difference. Most of all, dear God, give us your peace.